Okay, hi there. Ryanair is consistently one of the most profitable airlines in the world, and it achieves this in an industry where costs, revenues, and profits are subject to many external demand and supply side shocks. So, founded in 1984, in humble beginnings, they just had one route between Southern Ireland and London Gatwick. Ryanair, which is now based in Dublin, has grown dramatically, very rapidly, to become Europe's leading one of Europe's leading airlines. And in particular, it's profited, it's done well from the deregulation of the industry in the European Union, which has increased the contestability and allowed new low-cost carriers to grow rapidly. Here's the ebullient, controversial at times, Chief Executive Michael O'Leary. So the industry has grown, and so too has Ryanair. They are, in fact, the leading airline in Europe in 2021 based on passenger traffic. And things are once again looking up for Ryanair. Operating profits have taken off after what has certainly been a turbulent time during and immediately after all those COVID-19 restrictions during the pandemic. The latest news is that Ryanair has reported a profit after tax of over 200 million euros for just the last 3 months of 2022, against a loss of 96 million euros in the same period last year. So this marks a return to profitability for one of the most successful low-cost airlines in the world. A controversial airline, but undeniably highly successful. Here are the figures on passenger traffic. Ryanair leading the way ahead of Lufthansa, Aeroflot, Turkish Airlines, and notice there the right-hand side, EasyJet and Wizz Air, one of the new rivals based out of Hungary. So this chart shows you what has happened to their profits since 2010. And you can see the strong growth of net profit up to 2018, and then the difficult times experienced as the COVID pandemic took hold, leading, as we know, as we experienced, to a collapse in international passenger travel across nearly all of the route network, not just of Ryanair, but also for other airlines. The profits quickly turned to losses, as they did for virtually every other airline during this difficult period. So let's spend a few minutes, if we can, if it's okay with you, just working through their business model and asking the question, why is it so profitable? What are the cornerstones, the foundations of Ryanair as one of Europe's biggest low-cost passenger air carriers? Well, here's the low-cost business model. Their main aim, their key aim, or key objective is to be the airline with the lowest cost per passenger. Now, take out fuel. Fuel is an important cost, obviously, but their basic aim is to have an operating cost excluding fuel, which is the lowest of any airline. You might want to think about why that is the case. Driving that aim is the need for hyper-efficiency, high levels of productive efficiency in operations, achieving economies of scale. We'll talk a little bit about that. For example, using a single aircraft type across their fleet. They've built a hub and spoke route network, not easy to say. They tend to choose low-cost airports to reduce landing fees. And critically to Ryanair, they aim to be low cost, and they aim to maintain a very, very high passenger load factor. They try and fill their flights using dynamic pricing, which is where variable demand drives prices. If demand's high, prices straight away go up. If demand's low, prices fall. Dynamic pricing. We'll say a little bit about ancillary revenues beyond the basic ticket price. That's being at the core of Ryanair's growth and profitability, and also their commitment to sustainability, which is particularly important in the long run in aviation. So here's the map showing their sort of network. It's a hub and spoke strategy. They have 91 bases, 521 aircraft. They fly over nearly 2,500 routes, over 3,000 flights per day. They have 160 million customers, or guests as they call them, and they're aiming to get that to 225 million by 2026. Crucially, their aim is to drive down the unit cost of each passenger or guest to 30 euros per passenger, excluding fuel. That's the secret to low ticket prices. And they're also fully hedged against the world price. What that means is they tend to buy their aviation fuel in advance. So 2024, for example, they might be buying their fuel this year. So that takes away some of the uncertainty about what might happen to the price they have to pay for aviation fuel. Ryanair, big employer, clearly, fast growth, big business, over 11,000 cabin crew, nearly 6,000 pilots. But notice there that they outsource many of their ground operations to third-party businesses. So they've got a fairly small ground operations team, considering how many airports they fly to and take off from. And also they have a very small management workforce, just 116 in 2022. That helps keep their fixed costs quite low. Now, Ryanair is a fast-growing business. It's a huge business, and therefore you'd expect it to understand and exploit economies of scale. Economies of scale, the cost savings that a company, a business can achieve if it increases the scale of its operations. And Ryanair clearly has achieved several internal scale economies that help to maintain its low-cost position and maximise profitability. Well, I've just picked out three for you. One is, again, it's not rocket science, but Ryanair is a big business. It has significant monopsony or purchasing power, bargaining power, when they're negotiating prices and contracts with suppliers. So they can negotiate perhaps a better price for their fuel, for their maintenance contracts, for the consumables, the food and drink they use or sell on board. Big purchasing economies of scale. They also have invested heavily in a single fleet. I think it's the Boeing 737-800 flight plane. So they tend to just use one plane. Now that reduces maintenance costs. It also reduces the cost of training new pilots. It means they don't have to hold as much stock in terms of inventory, spare parts. Generally, if you know your fleet, if you know your aircraft, you can bring down the unit cost of supply at scale. And thirdly, operational efficiencies. That's things like outsourcing, baggage handling, investment in IT systems, covering all the ticketing, the flight planning and so on. Operating at scale efficiently and outsourcing where they can. So Ryanair clearly is a business which has achieved substantial economies of scale. And here's a quick diagram showing why this matters. Here's a set of cost curves. And if a firm profit maximizes, they can achieve the profit in green. But if they can bring their cost down to MC2, AC2, then the profit maximizing firm can charge a lower price, P2 instead of P1, at a much lower unit cost and make higher profit. This, of course, assumes Ryanair is a profit maximizer. It may well be a revenue maximizer or a growth maximizer. But you can see here that economies of scale help to bring down the unit cost and increase the total profits, whilst at the same time, of course, consumers or guests or passengers get a lower price for their flight, even if they have to experience the inconvenience that sometimes comes with flying with Ryanair. And crucially, I think this is a big part of the story about what makes Ryanair so profitable. Ryanair is the king, or the granddaddy, if one's being to think of it a different way, of ancillary revenues. Now, ancillary revenues are basically where you charge a basic ticket price, but you make some extra money. You charge for extra baggage fees, or you charge penalties if people rock up at the airport with too much luggage. People can pay for selecting their seat. People can pay a little extra to have priority boarding. And of course, the classic, of course, is selling in-flight beverage and food sales. Ryanair is brilliant at monetizing its passenger base. Low ticket price plus the ancillary revenues. I'll show you a staggering chart in a second on this. Now, hoping to carry over 225 million passengers by 2026. Now, if they can make a little few pounds extra from all of those passengers, it adds significantly to the top line, revenue, and the bottom line, which is operating profit. Here's the chart. So this is the revenue from just selling tickets, right? So this is in blue. And you can see, obviously you can see the effect of the pandemic in 2020, 21. But for most years before the pandemic, Ryanair was growing, more flights, more routes, full flights, and they were selling a lot of low-priced tickets. But if we add on, there we go, if we add on the ancillary revenue, they were adding hundreds of millions of euros through things like baggage charges, food, drink, retail, and other products. Obviously, they took a huge hit in 2021 during the pandemic, but one of the secrets to Ryanair is to understand the concept of ancillary revenue. Add that to your notes. Great concept to use. The other factor, which I'll finish with, is the load factor. So one of Ryanair's key objectives is to have as many flights as possible on profitable routes and to pack their flights. Load factor is a measure of capacity utilization. So things like buses and trains and airlines, okay? So a flight's going from Stansted to whatever it is, Milan, what percentage of seats are filled? That will be the load factor. And low-cost airlines, Wizz Air, EasyJet, Ryanair, they aim to fill as many of the seats as possible using dynamic pricing, price discrimination. So the price depends on demand relative to the number of seats. The key thing here is that most of the costs, I'm not sure the majority, but many of the costs of each flight are basically fixed. You have to pay them even if the flight is empty. So therefore, the more passengers you can get on the flight, that brings down the fixed cost per passenger, which then lowers the average cost or the unit cost of the business. And you can see here that load factor with Ryanair has been rising. Again, the pandemic caused a change, it was obvious, but by the latter part of the last decade, 2018, 2019, on average, 95, 96% of flights were full. Sometimes they overbook, of course, and load factor is now climbing again above 90%. Very, very important. So Ryanair, I hope you enjoyed this little case study. They have achieved substantial growth in recent years. Obscene, insane focus on increasing passenger numbers, expanding their fleet, growing their network, driving ancillary revenues, increasing their market share. You know, it's no mystery really, if you've understood what we're being through here, that Ryanair does make above average profits for the airline industry. So it's a really good case study to think about. Hope you enjoyed it. Please press like and subscribe if you thought it was helpful. We never take that for granted. Stay safe, stay happy, stay positive, and see you sometime soon.